Welcome to Girl Talk with your host, Melissa Ann. Girl Talk is that show which discusses the real issues Black women face being a mom, a dad, a wife, a girlfriend, a sister, a co-worker, a therapist, or whatever hat Black women wear on any particular day. Why? Because Black women are just dope. Without further ado, here is your host, Melissa Ann.
Welcome everyone to Girl Talk. This is your host, Melissa Ann, and today we're talking about emotional baggage. And today I have two special guests with me, my lovely friends. I know you know the mantra of when you know you have a friend, the best way to find out who your friends are is when you go through something. And these two ladies definitely fit that bill. One of them is the person that is always telling me to go sit down somewhere when I get in my feelings. The other one will walk away and say, all right, now it's time to go. But we're still friends otherwise, and friends do that. So I want to have a discussion with them. This is Girl Talk, and we're going to have this girl conversation about emotional baggage. And ladies, it is an absolute pleasure to have you on my podcast. I know we talk as girls often, but today is just you, I, and our listeners here. So Tiffanie, tell the audience who you are.
Hello, and thank you, Melissa Ann, for having me. This is really exciting. So my name is Tiffanie, and I am originally from Wilmington, North Carolina. I like to refer to it as the Port City. And that's where I was born and raised. And honestly, growing up as an only child, I really had a fairy tale life. Even though my parents separated and divorced, by the time I was 8, I have an amazing relationship with both of my parents. They've both always been there. But in 2002, that fairy tale came to an end through some tragedies that I hope we had an opportunity to talk about, because that is definitely some emotional baggage that I had to work through.
Ooh.
So again, thanks for having me.
We're definitely going to touch upon it. I want to hear your story.
Hello. I am Cassandra. And like Tiffanie, I also grew up as an only child. Unfortunately, though, my life wasn't so much a fairy tale. My childhood had some issues, but I also grew up in a home where my parents divorced when I was preteen. I do have a great relationship with both of them now. I grew up in North Carolina, so North Carolina is home. I had a great life, but I wouldn't classify it as fairy tale. So when people learn my story, they're pretty shocked to know some of the things that I went through. So hence emotional baggage and dealing with it is something that I'm looking forward to speaking with, because my recommendation would be definitely deal with it when you're younger, because it will surface when you're older if you don't.
That's very good advice. And you know what? I picked up on both of you talking about childhood trauma, so to speak, or issues in your childhood that you carried over into your adulthood. And I think a lot of times, and the same thing happened for me. And I think, a lot of times we don't address it. But, what are some of the things that you would say, each of you, one of you can choose to go first, but tell us a little bit about your story. What are some of the things that happened to you in your childhood? And then, how did that transpire over into, or transpose over into your adult life?
Okay, I'll go first. I don't have a problem going first since Tiffanie introduced first. So I was sexually molested starting from the age of 3 until I was about 15. Not by the same person. It started being one person, and then it changed just when I thought I'd finally escaped and gotten out of that. Then it was someone else. And no one ever knew, because how I hid that or what happened was I became an overachiever, right? Straight A student, top of my class, involved in every single thing, very active in just extracurricular activities, church, home, wherever there was something to be done, I did it. And so what I learned was that I masked the feeling. I didn't deal with the trauma. Actually, I was so young, I couldn't even process the trauma, to be honest. But when I was older and understood the trauma that had happened, I masked it by being an overachiever and trying to define my worth in the things that I did. And so I never dealt with it.
You know, you're talking about molestation, and I too am a product of molestation as a kid. And so many women, I can tell you, you can talk to a plethora of women and they will say the same thing. They've had some instance of molestation, and then some handle it differently and some handle it like you and I step over it. I told my mom initially, and I don't, know why she brought me back to the environment, maybe because she had to work. But once that happened, I never again spoke about it until I was 33 years old. So why do you think it took you so long to expose it?
Two things for me. First of all, like I said, it started when I was so young that I didn't even know how to process it, right? And the very first incident, when it happened, I was looking for my friend. And I think I never exposed it for two reasons. The person threatened the person that I loved the most, which was my mom. Like, they threatened to kill my mom if I spoke up. Of course, hindsight is, of course that wouldn't happen, right? But again, you're talking about the mind of a 3-year-old. And then the other reason that I don't think I ever said anything was because I was looking for a friend and I was out of place. And as a result, when I went home, I got in trouble for being out of place. So then I just kind of internalized it for as much as the 3-year-old mind can. And I just kept it quiet and tried to avoid the situation when possible. Unfortunately, there were many times when I couldn't, because kind of to your story too, Melissa, it was the place that I would go when I came home from school.
Right. And you're kind of stuck. And you don't know, you don't know what to feel,
Yeah.
Or you just don't know what to feel. And I think so many women have carried this burden and what we call emotional baggage. That's another rock we have in our bag, in our backpack, that we press down and then we move on to the next thing.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So Tiffanie, speaking of rocks, and Cassandra, I definitely want to go back to those feelings. But Tiffanie, you might not have carried that rock. But what's the rock that you have been carrying that you've had to dispose of?
So for me, it was once I turned 23. So I, again, going back to the fairy tale childhood, being the only child, it was all about me. I had this, quote unquote, great life. And then at the age of 23, my daughter's father was murdered when she was 3 years old. So sitting through not one, but 2 murder trials and having to listen to all of the details that led up to the end of his life definitely took a toll on me. And I was so used to, my mom and my dad being able to fix everything, whenever something went wrong, they could fix it. Well, this was something they couldn't fix, and we have this superwoman syndrome. So it was one of those things where I felt like, okay, you know what? This has happened. I have to, put my big girl pants on. I still have to raise our daughter and I have to move on. So life goes on. That was in 2002. In 2005, I had the opportunity to fall in love again and got married. And in 2009, my husband had a heart attack in his sleep and died.
Wow.
So that was a morning that I will never forget, right? I woke up to his lifeless body, trying every part of me, everything in me, trying to breathe life back into his body. So as a result of that, here we go again. And that's exactly how I felt like, wow, like again, and having to tell my daughter again that, I already had to tell her when she was 3 that her dad would no longer be in her life. And now, her stepfather was gone. That was a lot. And, it's almost like for an entire year, I felt like I was kind of on autopilot. People would ask me how I was doing, and my response was the same. Well, I've gotten through this before. We're going to get through it again. I just have to pray and I have to keep on because I have to take care of my daughter.
Right.
And I honestly, when it caught up with me was the first time that I experienced how holding on to emotional baggage will truly impact your mental health. At the time, I was a sales manager at National Grand Hotel, and I was detailing events, and I couldn't remember anything, you guys, like nothing. I would be on the phone with a client detailing events, and if I didn't write every single thing down, by the time I hung up the phone, I couldn't remember anything because my brain was on overload, complete overload. So that was my first time experiencing how important it is for us to process emotional baggage.
And I think, as you know, that story to me is incredible. And of course, I've heard it before. And I think that would take the strongest person down.
Yeah.
You having that back to back. And then if I recall your story, you thought your husband was just sleeping.
I did. I sure did. The alarm went off that morning. And, this was January 30th. So it was cold. And I remember like feeling him and he was cold. And I actually got up and turned the heat on. Wow. But when I got back in the bed, it didn't feel right. And at that point, that's when I turned the light on and tried to wake him up. And that just, again, a morning I will never forget. I don't wish that on anybody at all, because it's something that just replays over and over and over again for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah, and both of you, you're both remarkable, right? Because I've known you a number of years, and Tiffanie, I've definitely heard that story, and I've heard how you've overcome many things. Cassandra, I've never heard you talk about that. But to know you wouldn't know, even based upon your personality and how you treat people, that you went through those things. And it goes back to how strong we as Black women think we have to be. And so we overcompensate for that, step over that stuff and keep it moving, throw the rock in the backpack and keep it moving.
And keep it moving.
Why do you think we do that?
I think society somewhat mandates it. So something that I noticed, and I think this will answer your question. Unfortunately, I'm going to go around my elbow to get there. But Tiffanie mentioned something in her story, which again, Melissa, we've heard it before, and it hit me different hearing it tonight. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that she said was she knew she had to take care of their daughter when she found out that her daughter's father had passed. She said, I knew I had to take care of our daughter. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was, I wanted to protect something outside of me as well, namely my mom, because that's who the person had threatened. So what I noticed is we tend to find strength outside of ourselves to push us to keep going, something that we value even more than ourselves. And so we just push and we push. And part of that, I think, is because me personally, I'll speak for me, is I didn't want to let my mom, my parents down. So I did what I had to do to be what I thought I needed to be in their eyes. Right. Now, as an adult and having now shared this, I know that I could have handled it differently, and it wouldn't have changed how they saw me or felt about me. But at the time, that wasn't how I understood it, how I processed it. So the lesson that I took from it with being a mom now is that I make it a point to say to my children all the time, it doesn't matter what you go through, what you experience, what you do, what you don't do, what someone else does. I'm here for you and I love you, and nothing will change how I feel about you. Right. And you know what is deep is that, we've all been single moms. We've had stints as single moms.
And our children have come first, regardless of how we're feeling, whether we want to wake up in the morning. And if you're anything like me, that emotional baggage, like you said, Tiffanie, starts to weigh on you so hard that you just want to give up.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, as far as me, I know one of the things that made me just, we always say put your big girl pants on and keep moving, was image. And how I was brought up, especially in a small town, people rely heavily on image. And for me, I wanted to make sure that I didn't seem weak or that I couldn't handle what life threw at me. And now, at 41, I completely could care less about what anybody thinks or has to say about me. But, you have to get there. And for me, when I think back now, I just think about how I would just cry myself to sleep, how I would cry the entire drive to work, but I would dry my tears, get my face together, put my head up and walk into that building as if nothing happened, right? And then it's like I would pick the baggage back up when I got in my car after work and just be in my feelings and actually feel. Because I think, again, I refer to the year after Ryan passed away, that I felt like I was a robot, right? It's like I had to detach my emotions from the entire situation just to maintain on a daily basis. And that will catch up with you.
Maintain.
Yep. Maintain.
Not thrive. Maintain. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of maintaining. We maintain our household. We maintain for our children. We maintain for work, but we don't thrive. And there's a difference between existing, which is what we're doing when we're maintaining, and living.
Absolutely.
And can I speak to that real quick? To that very point that Tiffanie was making about maintaining, it was one day when I couldn't maintain that I realized that I hadn't been living, right? So I was actually in college the first time that I began to unpack the emotional baggage. And it was exactly like Tiffanie mentioned, meaning I was maintaining, right? I was maintaining good grades. I was maintaining this persona, but I wasn't really enjoying life. Right. I actually wasn't even feeling. So it wasn't a point of putting down the bags, putting on a face, and then later picking it up. I had gotten to the point that I was never picking it up. And then one day it just came to a halt.
You cannot maintain it, right? Because once that bag gets full of rocks on your back, what happens? You stop moving. It's too damn heavy.
That's absolutely, and it's ironic because one of my favorite songs is Erykah Badu's "Bag Lady," right? And she literally says, "You will hurt your back dragging all those bags around," and baggage costs a lot. I mean, literally, like when we fly and when we go into the airport, the more bags you have, it's going to cost you, right? And it's the same thing with emotional baggage. It costs you your peace. It costs your joy. And until you process those things and put them in their proper place, it's going to weigh you down completely. And for me, my halt came just a few years ago. I thought I had processed things because I'd gotten so accustomed to maintaining and not feeling. I was just, again, that robot feeling. You go with it. Cassandra, you and I, we were on this ride together as far as just back-to-back deaths. And my family had a stint where we had, 5 deaths in a matter of 10 months. And that honestly is what broke me. After all of those years of dealing with my daughter's father's death, dealing with my first husband's death, those deaths, that is what finally brought me to my knees, to the point where I could not take it anymore. And I had to, for me, what truly, truly helped me, obviously, is me turning and surrendering everything over to God, and me seeking professional help. Because at that point, I had to give up the superwoman syndrome. I knew I needed someone to help me get through this process so that I could truly find my peace.
And I remember that time. And I remember the time after you started going to therapy, and your whole countenance was different.
Yeah.
Your entire countenance was different. You had so much life. You know, you were living versus existing.
Yes. Yes. I felt free because I truly learned that you have to process things and put them in their proper place. Because if you don't, carrying all those bags around, I mean, literally, y'all, just imagine just going through the airport or just going through life with 20 bags, 50 bags. Like that, you can't do that. You can't. You have to process those things so everything can fit into a nice little carry-on. And that's where you're going to get your peace. You have to process those things. And until I realized that, you're right. I wasn't living. I was maintaining. I was just existing.
Exactly. You're just existing. And you guys know, I am a published author, and my book dropped today. So for those of you listening, the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Books A Million, Ducks on a Pond. But I want to read a poem, and I want to get your thoughts on this. The poem is Growing Up Woman. In this life, I've searched for princes and kissed frogs. I've tasted the stench of death and rose like a flower amid a desert. I've carried torches that should have been buried. I've fought for equality and have yet to win the war. I've cried for babies and have felt the tiny hand of love burrowed inside. I've lost lovers who vowed to love me forever, but forever never came. I've rushed happiness and have forgotten to live inside my own. I've run barefoot in the sand of hope, feeling every grain slide through my toes, unwilling to hold on. I've persevered through hate and shadows of anger, only to find that anger was inside of me. I've not let it go. I've trusted too much and gained very little. I've smiled while I've cried. I've danced when the odds stacked themselves eagerly against me. I've longed for a mother's I love you and waited for a dad's hug on an uneasy day. I grew weary of waiting. I am woman, flowing aimlessly in the wind, soft, durable, delicate, timeless. Does any of that resonate with you?
All of it. Yeah, all of it resonates with me.
The line that, even though I wrote it, the line that stands out to me the most is, I've rushed happiness and forgotten to live inside my own. What does that mean to you when you think about emotional baggage?
For me personally, gosh, that summed up my life so well. Rushing happiness for me personally is not enjoying the journey, but rushing to get to a particular destination. And so what I mean by that, like growing up, we took lots of trips, right? Because my mom is from a really big family. And so we would take trips to visit her sisters or brothers all over the country. And now that I'm older, I realize that a lot of the fun of those trips was the actual trip.
Right.
Just as much as getting to the destination. Now bring that back to being an adult or just living life. I found myself not so much enjoying where I was or what I was, but just constantly trying to get to the next thing, right? So, okay, great. I'm here. I've accomplished this. What's next? I'm here. I'm trying to accomplish this. What's next? How do I get there? What's the fastest way? Instead of taking a moment to actually enjoy where I am, where is my happiness? What am I feeling? What am I doing? But really just living outside of the feelings, but being driven to something else, looking for that thing to fulfill me when the fulfillment would come from within myself.
Right. We look for so many things to fulfill us, right? We look for men. We look for our kids. We live in vicariously through our kids.
Yep. Even work.
Work, yeah.
Yeah, lots of things.
Well, I had to be told, via seeking therapy, like, when do you focus on yourself? You focus on everybody else, but when do you focus on Melissa?
And I still struggle with that.
Yeah.
That's right. Because even like for me growing up, watching my grandmother hold it down, like completely hold it down. But when I, becoming an adult and having the opportunity to just have so many conversations with her, and she would tell me, take care of you. Take care of you, Tiff. And just, recently over these past couple of years, as I've done so much soul searching for myself, I understand what she meant by that. You guys, like we take care of everybody else except ourselves. And we can't even be effective mothers, an effective wife, an effective daughter, friend, if we're not okay, right?
No.
We have to take care of ourselves before we take care of anybody else. And I used to think that was selfish. No, that's not self-love. Right. That is called self-love. And that's, for me, I wasn't taught that because I watched my grandmother, even my mom, always put me first, always put the family first. And now I am okay with making sure that I take care of myself first so that I then can be the best mom, the best wife, the best daughter, the best friend that I can be. But if Tiff's not okay, it's just going to have a trickle down effect. And that's not fair to myself or the people that I love.
Absolutely. And likewise, when visiting a counselor, because I started going back a few years ago as well. And that was one of the things that was pointed out too, because my focus was caring for others, caring for my kids, making sure they had everything, making sure my parents had what they needed now that they're getting older. And my counselor said, well, what happens to them if you're not okay?
Mm-hmm. Right.
What happens to them if something happens to you?
Right. Right.
And I can't take care of them if I'm not okay. And so my counselor helped me begin to unpack the additional weight, bags, rocks that I picked up from 15 on, right? So dealing with, because I didn't unpack that baggage from my childhood, I continued to pick up different things. And when I thought I dealt with one thing, but I was seeing results that I didn't want in another area. So I'm divorced. I was married for 10 years and I'm now divorced. Seeing results and then unhealthy relationships post my marriage and all of that. Again, it was because certain emotions, certain baggage, certain issues hadn't been dealt with from way back when. And I want to make a plug here because we've all three mentioned the importance of mental health. And I really want us as a people to destigmatize mental health, right? There's no shame in going to the doctor if your stomach hurts, if your heart hurts, if your leg is broken. Well, your brain is an organ just like the other organs that we care for. And so we have to destigmatize that so that people will take care of a very vital organ, right? Because if that organ doesn't work properly, the rest of us doesn't either. We're really zombies because we're not living the life that we were meant to live.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Ladies, this has been a very good conversation. This has been a word for the people. I really, really, really appreciate you joining me today. We have to do it again with a different topic. And I thank you both for joining me. And this has been Girl Talk with Melissa Ann. Remember, you are not your past, but I see you because I am you.
You have just listened to the Girl Talk podcast with your host, Melissa Ann. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play. Until next time, remember, I see you because I am you.